Do you find the defendant guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
You say that he's guilty, Mr. Foreperson?
That's correct.
So say you all, ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
Blakelively just broke down in court as the judge delivered a brutal verdict that shattered her public image in seconds, and the room froze as the consequences became impossible to ignore, with millions in damages looming and a serious criminal referral hanging overhead like a storm cloud ready to burst. The judge didn't mince words, calling her actions calculated deception disguised as brand management, and made sure every person present understood the weight of that statement as it echoed across the courtroom. In that moment, Blakelively's perfectly filtered Instagram life collided headfirst with reality, stripped of soft lighting, curated captions, and lifestyle branding, leaving only a judge, a ruling, and a woman who believed her Hollywood image could smother a legal wildfire. On June 6, 2025, Judge Miriam Calloway issued a decision that didn't merely sting but threatened to end careers, formally titled Carly Benson v. Blakelively and Preserve Incorporated, a case centered on workplace abuse, systematic cover-ups, and what the court described as industrial strength manipulation. The atmosphere was pure courtroom chaos, and Blake did not arrive as the polished, empowered entrepreneur portrayed in glowing magazine features. Instead, witnesses say she entered and exited the courtroom visibly unraveling, emotionally overwhelmed as the narrative she curated for years finally collapsed. When Judge Calloway looked directly at her and labeled her the mastermind behind a coordinated abuse cover-up, the fantasy bubble burst in real time, and the consequences quickly turned financial as well as reputational. This was not a symbolic reprimand, but an $11.4 million judgment, including $8 million in damages tied to workplace abuse, and an additional federal referral for obstruction of justice involving alleged record tampering and shell company laundering connected to Preserve branding operations. Then came the moment that detonated her defense entirely, a 42-second surveillance clip mistakenly submitted by her own legal team during routine evidence filing, a short video that dismantled years of carefully managed public relations in seconds. The footage showed Blake during an office meltdown, hurling a wine glass across the room in a fit of rage, an image impossible to reconcile with the clean, curated persona she sold to the public. As the clip played, she reportedly stood and shouted that it was fake, only for the judge to state it was unmistakably authentic and the clearest evidence presented, with Preserve's former security chief confirming the timestamp as January 13, 2016. Her attorneys attempted to suppress the clip by arguing unauthorized surveillance, but forensic analysis showed no edits, no tampering, and earned zero sympathy from the bench. The fallout was immediate and brutal, as within 24 hours of the video spreading online, Blake Brown's stock affiliate dropped 13 points, and the hashtag Glassgate exploded across social media. Yet the real force behind the collapse was Carly Benson, not a disgruntled former employee but the assistant Blake allegedly tried to erase, who instead methodically dismantled the empire by testifying that during an argument over candle inventory, Blake launched a wine glass across the office, shattering more than glass and permanently altering the balance of power. This case moved into the Southern District of New York, and at that point it stopped being about bad behavior and crossed firmly into potential obstruction of justice territory, the kind of situation where lifestyle aesthetics stop mattering because orange jumpsuits do not pair well with any carefully curated brand image. Judge Calloway didn't soften the language at all, stating plainly that Blake's behavior amounted to calculated deception under the guise of brand management, which was essentially the court's way of saying she believed she could behave abusively behind closed doors and then smooth it over with filters, captions, and public charm. The judge went even further, delivering a line that felt less like a legal observation and more like a final verdict on character, saying that had the situation been handled with basic human decency, there would have been no trial, but instead public relations warfare was chosen over empathy and accountability. In that moment, it felt less like a ruling and more like a eulogy for an entire manufactured girl boss empire, and even seasoned legal analysts, people usually known for emotionless commentary, called it one of the most damning celebrity employer rulings since the Ellen DeGeneres workplace exposure, except this time supported by forensic evidence rather than anonymous accounts. The financial side of the case only made things darker, as audits uncovered not just red flags but what investigators described as a blaring siren pointing directly toward hush money, including $228,000 labeled as consulting fees paid to a company called CB Holdings. That company was formed just 2 weeks after Carly's emergency room visit, and the coincidence strained all credibility, especially since the initials matched Carly Benson's name exactly, a detail Blake's team tried to dismiss as meaningless. Carly herself denied any connection to the company, and investigators found no contracts, no work logs, and no proof of actual consulting services rendered, which only deepened suspicion. The situation escalated further when digital records showed that CB Holdings and 2 additional shell companies were created using an IP address traced directly to the Jones Works Crisis Communications team, the same group publicly attempting to frame the controversy as a minor misunderstanding. Their fingerprints on the financial trail turned what might have been plausible deniability into something far more dangerous. Internal messages entered into evidence didn't help either, including a text from Blake that read, "We control the narrative before anyone defines it for us," a sentence that legal experts noted could be used as a textbook example of conspiracy language. Another internal directive instructed the team to contain Carly's story and stated there was no need to escalate if public relations efforts buried it, a line that sounded less like strategy and more like desperation. The courtroom then heard from Jennifer Owl, the former head of crisis communications at Jones Works, whose testimony detonated whatever defenses remained. Under oath, Jennifer stated that Blake personally ordered the suppression of multiple human resources complaints, not trivial workplace grievances, but reports involving intimidation, safety concerns, and in Carly's case, physical assault. According to Jennifer, Blake's priority was never resolving harm but denying it existed at all, shifting from damage control to outright damage denial. The most chilling revelation came when Jennifer disclosed that Blake's team accessed private mental health records belonging to employees, records unrelated to the case, which were then analyzed and weaponized to discredit potential whistleblowers. An email submitted under subpoena read, "If Carly flips, we flip it back on her," language the court interpreted as deliberate gaslighting rather than corporate defense. Jennifer also described approved tactics that included planting favorable People magazine features highlighting Blake's upbringing and creative empowerment, soft-focus narratives designed to distract from allegations by flooding media channels with sympathetic imagery. She characterized the entire operation not as public relations, but as digital warfare against victims, carefully designed, deployed, and authorized at the highest level. Jennifer was not treated as a disgruntled former employee seeking revenge, because she arrived with extensive documentation, including email chains, Slack messages, internal memos, and timestamps that corroborated every major claim. By the time her testimony concluded, the picture was clear to the court that this was not a celebrity caught off guard by chaos, but an individual operating within a system intentionally built to silence, manipulate, suppress, and spin, a system that functioned smoothly until exposure made denial impossible. Warfare on victims. You could feel it. The walls of the fake Blake Lively brand, they didn't just crack, they collapsed. So, while Blake Lively was busy launching wine glasses and weaponizing puff pieces, guess who was quietly lurking in the background of this PR dumpster fire? That's right, Mr. Deadpool himself, Ryan Reynolds. And let's just say the man who can sell a phone plan in a sarcastic voiceover couldn't dodge this mess. Even if he turned invisible again, emails dropped in court didn't just hint at Ryan's awareness. They practically screamed it. Blake messaged him 48 hours after Carly's injury with the now infamous line, "Handled it. PR will keep your stuff buried." No need to escalate, treating it like a scheduling conflict, not a bleeding assistant with 9 stitches and a deleted medical file. Legal analysts immediately asked the obvious. Did Ryan know about the injury? About the PR scrub? About the entire orchestration? Or was he just sipping aviation gin in the corner watching his wife turn their empire into an HR horror story? Now, Ryan hasn't been named in the actual lawsuit yet, but he's reportedly on the shortlist for subpoenas in the financial misconduct phase. And given what we know, that subpoena might hit his inbox before his next auto-generated tweet does. And speaking of timing, let's talk about Animal Friends. Ryan's movie was originally set to release in October 2025. Then came the court drama, and suddenly it's been pushed all the way to May 2026. You know what else was pushed? Every brand that doesn't want to touch this radioactive circus with a 10-foot pole. 3 major partners quietly hit pause on their endorsements with aviation gin, citing, get this, PR sensitivities. No one wants to be associated with the guy married to the woman whose name was erased from an ER file by a PR intern. And listen, it's not just about what Ryan did or didn't do. It's about the silence. When your wife's being accused of covering up workplace abuse and deleting hospital records, and you say nothing, you don't get to play the just a bystander card. Silence isn't innocence. It's complicity dressed up in a tailored suit. Now, while all this courtroom chaos unfolded, Blake Lively decided to do what she does best, perform online like she's living in a Hallmark fever dream. And it was bizarre, absolutely unhinged. Let's start with the most deranged PR move of all time. In the middle of her abuse scandal, Blake posted photos of, wait for it, funeral flower arrangements. She even offered to help fans plan their funerals. You can't make this up. This woman went from support local artisans to I'll coordinate your casket decor in the middle of a trial. The internet obviously imploded. Backlash poured in from every corner. But Blake, being Blake, tried to double down with more self-indulgent nonsense. She reposted quotes about being generous and misunderstood, complete with captions like, people only see what they want to believe. No, Blake. People believe what's on video. You know, like the one where you screamed and launched glass at your employee's face. And it doesn't stop there. According to the Daily Mail, Blake allegedly drafted her own coverage for People magazine. That's right. When the court heat got too intense, she wrote herself a sympathy article complete with the line that she credits her mom for creative empowerment. Meanwhile, her former assistant needed creative empowerment just to get out of the break room alive. Even her fans started to turn after her team posted, deleted, and reposted content 4 times in 48 hours. People on Twitter started calling her America's least relatable woman. And they weren't wrong. Who else responds to a lawsuit by alternating between flower photos and vague quotes about kindness? Resistance, the PR flood tactic, defined this phase as her team strategically buried bad press by planting puff stories about Ryan Reynolds buying a sailing club with Hugh Jackman, because nothing says total innocence like a yacht club bromance erupting in the middle of a courtroom meltdown. While Carly Benson was dragged through witness hearings and trauma therapy, Blake's PR machine pitched glossy headlines like Ryan sets sail for new horizons, as if nautical vibes could drown out sworn testimony. It felt like watching a desperate magician point at glitter while the stage burned, but no one bought it, because when your brand's last defense is flower pics and yacht clubs, the illusion is dead. Then Judge Calloway delivered a closing statement that didn't just end the trial, it ended careers, stating clearly that accountability isn't optional just because you're famous. She followed with a final blow, saying this was no accident but a blueprint for erasure, not a misunderstanding, not a mistake. A deliberate design. With that, Blake Lively faced civil penalties, a pending federal investigation, and the real threat of industry blacklisting, meaning red carpets may be rolled up permanently. Multiple production contracts were paused indefinitely. Betty Boo's was pulled from shelves by major retailers, and perhaps most painfully, her closest celebrity allies went silent, including Taylor Swift, whose lack of response spoke louder than any statement. Meanwhile, Carly Benson did what Blake never could, turning pain into purpose by launching a nonprofit for corporate abuse survivors, raising $1.3 million in just 48 hours, proof of what happens when people believe you without filters or fluff. Blake's final words in court were recorded as claiming the entire case was a smear campaign and that she was the real victim, a statement that perfectly captured the mindset on display throughout the trial. What made the proceedings surreal wasn't only the evidence, but the spectacle, as the courtroom felt like a live-streamed celebrity takedown, reporters crowding every entrance and sketch artists acting like paparazzi. Gasps rippled through the audience whenever new documents were unsealed, and lawyers performed as much for public perception as for the bench. One analyst compared it to a high-stakes Broadway tragedy where the lead actress failed to realize she was also the villain. The prosecution stayed surgical and cold, dropping receipts with precision, while Blake's defense appeared visibly fractured, with rumors that 2 associates walked out during prep, unwilling to shield a client who mistook good lighting for accountability. When a courtroom becomes an arena, evidence is the only voice that matters, and here it shouted what Blake could not silence. When the gavel finally dropped and headlines slowed, there was no director calling cut, no script to rewrite, no lighting crew to soften reality, only wreckage, and this time it belonged entirely to her. And if anyone thinks this drama has reached its final act, they should understand that consequences rarely end when the cameras stop rolling. The aftermath continues beyond verdicts and viral clips, because investigations move slower than gossip but cut deeper, and every paused deal represents lost trust that cannot be rebranded away. Studios now weigh risk over star power, insurers scrutinize morality clauses, and executives quietly reassess partnerships once considered untouchable. Employees across the industry are watching, recognizing that silence has costs and documentation has power, lessons written plainly across transcripts and exhibits. For survivors, the case signals that influence does not immunize misconduct, and for brands, it warns that narrative control collapses under authenticated facts. This chapter closes with records preserved, systems examined, and reputations recalculated, leaving a stark reminder that fame magnifies choices, and when accountability arrives, it does not ask permission.